Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on West Asia War. I'm Ashmit Kumar. Now, US President Donald Trump has delayed strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. He claimed that talks with top Iranian leaders were constructive and positive, but clarified that it was not the Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Tehran rejected these claims, saying that the US did not hold direct talks with Iran and called the statement fake news. Iran believes this move is a tactic by the US to buy time while deploying forces in the Gulf and preparing for a massive strike on Iran and also to manipulate oil and financial markets. Despite Trump's claim that Iran wants a deal and that both sides have agreed on major points, this has not stopped United States forces from striking Iran. Reacting to the Iran-US talks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel's interests will be safeguarded. As per Iranian media, 2 gas facilities and a pipeline in Isfahan were targeted after Trump's truce announcement. It added that the facilities in central Iran were also partially damaged. Overnight, Israeli-US forces struck several residential areas in northern Iran, killing over 5 people, while Iran launched drones and missiles towards Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Israel in retaliation. Now, amidst all of this, the role of one nation has emerged, that's Pakistan. Reports suggest that Pakistan has taken an active role as a mediator and is involved in the Iran-US talks. According to the Financial Times, the Pakistani army chief is speaking with Donald Trump, while Pakistani Prime Minister Mohammad Shahbaz is engaging with the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. Apart from Pakistan, Egypt and Turkey are also engaged with both countries to ensure back-channel talks. Well, joining us now to take this discussion forward are with me Yasser Al-Maliki, Gulf analyst with the Middle East Economic Survey. Also with us, Brahma Chilani, strategic affairs expert, and Adam Dixon, Adam Smith, chair of the Panmure House. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Mr. Dixon, let me come to you first again. Many are asking the question, how credible, how serious is Donald Trump when he talks about cessation of hostilities? The reason being, what we've seen over the last 24 hours, despite his assurances, Iran media claims that there are hits being secured on Iranian gas facilities, which again goes against what Donald Trump had assured on his post on Truth Social.
So I think in any conflict, there's always going to be, if you like, propaganda from both sides. And as we know how Trump likes to operate, he is trying to, on the one hand, manage market signals. That's clear. But also, I think, not give out too much in terms of what his plans are. And we've seen that from the beginning. And I think the frustration that many seem to have is they want to know, what is the plan for this conflict? What is the timeline? It's as if everyone seems to expect that in a conflict, they're told, well, this is going to happen on day 2 and day 3 and day 4. And I think that's a naive expectation. So, of course, I think, this is a very fast-moving conflict. Of course, there are back channels that we're seeing from various parties in terms of trying to understand where there's room to push Iran in a particular direction, whether that's de-escalation or not. But I think, like with anything that Trump says, you can't necessarily take it at face value.
Mr. Dixon, just a follow-up question to that. The timing of it, again, is what is leading to the suspicions regarding the intent behind the statement. The timing being, of course, the fact that the statement comes in when the oil prices were at an all-time high. They had breached the $100 mark. The timing also, interestingly, is when we are seeing United States ground forces being deployed in the region. We're seeing open source information which suggests that as many as various aircraft, 35 C-17 aircrafts are making their way towards bases, towards in Jordan, in Israel, that there are ground forces that are also being deployed in the region. That is leading to give more credibility to the theories being put out that perhaps this is just a wait-and-watch mode by Donald Trump till at least there is a ground offensive ready to be launched.
I think, on the one hand, you could say that that's possibly correct. I mean, it's no coincidence that Trump announced this before markets opened yesterday, and he's trying, if you like, to manage those expectations in the market and potentially buy more time for the USS Tripoli to reach the Gulf area and for other assets to move in the region. But I think it's also important to recognize that there are likely to be back-channel conversations that are happening with various actors in Iran. The bigger question is who is actually in charge, right? And who is actually guiding in terms their Iranian response. And that's why I don't think we actually know the answer to that. And I think, as we see with many authoritarian regimes, is once you start to decapitate and take away that senior leadership, it leads to a more chaotic situation which is on the one hand concerning, but is also, I think, typical of these very hierarchical and top-down driven societies, or at least regimes.
Sure. Let me also get Mr. Chilani in on this conversation. Mr. Chilani, again, the optics of it, Donald Trump making an announcement, news reports emerging that perhaps Pakistan is likely to play the role of a mediator. Again, what is your understanding of the way things are playing out? How carefully are you suspicious of some of these developments? Are you giving credibility to the statements that are being put out by the White House, by Donald Trump?
Donald Trump has broken all the international norms that relate to peace and conflict. The question that was asked by Mr. Dixon, who's in charge or who's guiding Iran's response? The bigger question is, who's guiding America's response? Is it just one man? Is that one man open to professional advice from his military as well as senior officials in the administration? Or is it just Trump deciding based on his own instincts as to what should be done? And one other thing that we should not forget, that his statements yesterday came just when his 48-hour deadline to, quote unquote, obliterate Iran's electrical grid was coming to an end. So he basically bought more time for himself, because by Friday, now the five-day extension is up to Friday. By then, Marine Expeditionary Forces and possibly even airborne commandos would be in position in the Persian Gulf. So this could be a ploy. And if you go by his statements in the past, he often engages in public deception. The way he began this war, just when a deal with Tehran appeared to be within Trump's grasp, according to the Omani foreign minister, who was the key mediator between Washington and Tehran. And under the cover of talks, he launched this war. And therefore, right, we have to be very careful. And his threat to take out Iran's electrical grid is actually an open contempt for the Geneva Conventions. The Geneva Conventions, reinforced by the additional Protocol 1, explicitly prohibit attacks on objects indispensable to the survival of civilian population. Electrical plants underpin basic civilian needs, including powering hospitals, water systems, and sanitation. Their deliberate destruction is unlawful. And here we have the President of the United States openly threatening to completely obliterate Iran's electrical grid.
Right. Mr. Maliki, let me also get your thoughts on the same issue again. This assurance coming in from Donald Trump, how the markets are perceiving it, how the Gulf is perceiving it, and especially in context of what Joe Kent had put out on his social media post, essentially saying that, look, any path towards de-escalation will involve the United States, Donald Trump reigning in Israel. Do you see that happening?
Thank you very much for having me. I mean, let's start with the markets and the oil market. I think it's been quite hard to to see traders trying to price in any sign of de-escalation. We saw prices beginning to go down in terms of oil. On the belief that there could be a ceasefire sooner rather than later. But, as it's seen today, they have gone back up again, and the market remains driven by sentiment. And traders are struggling to price in the situation because it remains extremely volatile and uncertain. So there is a real-time trading headline to headline and contradictory political signals. I think your other guests have covered that quite well. Now, when it comes to the remaining part of your question, I think there remains a large gap between the US and Iran, both sides, on what a ceasefire could be. I think the Iranians have clearly said that they would like to have a political guarantee in any kind of a deal. It's unclear who is going to provide that political guarantee. China has been watching from the sidelines. Russia has been weakened by its war in Ukraine. So this clearly remains a problem. For countries in the region, there are also other considerations. I think they have legitimate concerns when it comes to what happens to the Strait of Hormuz. How is it going to be managed? Any deal that is going to legitimize even partial Iranian management of the strait is not going to be acceptable, because this is, by the end of the day, an international waterway. So again, as you started this segment, this could be a delaying tactic for something else to happen, maybe another round of escalation. And we will have to, basically, the proof is in the pudding when it comes to a ceasefire.
But circling back, Mr. Maleki, to the point about while the complicated relationship exists between Iran and the United States, there's also complications in the relationship between US and Israel. So for any de-escalation to move forward, is it possible without reining in Israel, without reining in Benjamin Netanyahu? And is that even possible, given what we've seen over the last 25 days?
I think, we have seen some signs of a fracture between the US and Israel when it comes to the objectives of the campaign. Israel has been very clear on what the objectives are. The objectives are to dismantle the nuclear program, the missile program, and to at least weaken Iran. So after the war, there could be enough dynamics internally for regime change. The US objectives are not very clear. Now, whether what happened with the attack on South Pass in Iran, the processing plants, showed that this fracture has widened. But at the same time, I think both governments were very keen on showing that they are in sync when it comes to this campaign. But yes, it will be there might not be as much enthusiasm in Israel to see this campaign ended early. But again, keep in mind also that Israel is on the receiving end of Iranian missile barrages, and sooner or later the Israeli public would like its government to find a way out of the conflict.
Sure, Mr. Maleki. On that note, let's slip into a very short break. We'll continue this conversation on the path forward on the other side. Welcome back. We're continuing our focus on the West Asia conflict. With us, we have an esteemed group of panelists. First, let's go across to Mr. Adam Dixon. Mr. Dixon, coming back to you, there are reports which seem to suggest that the U.S. is trying to appoint someone. The Speaker of the Parliament in Iran seems to have found favor with the U.S. The question that many are asking is that, is Donald Trump looking for his Delcy Rodriguez of Iran, and is he likely to find such a leader in a much more complicated, complex, hardline society like Iran?
Well, I think the question needs to be asked is, what do the Iranian people want? So we know that the vast majority of Iranians, and we saw this with the many that went out on the streets in January and the many that were massacred, do not like the regime. Notwithstanding, there is a transition that hopefully will take place that leads to an Iran that is more amenable to the vast majority of the population. So to get there, though, it is likely the case that you would hope that there would be some sort of reconciliation where those hardliners of the regime, if they are even amenable, will allow a transition to take place. And I think looking towards those sensible people within the regime that will take part in that is what the Trump administration is looking for. But it's really hard to say at this moment whether a transition will take place. We see that Israel as well as the United States are trying to neuter, if you like, the police forces, the Basij, that have oppressed people in the street and are still threatening to shoot any protesters in Iran. And I think once that is relieved, then perhaps they'll see a degree of popular uprising where people do not feel that they're going to be shot or massacred for speaking out against a repressive regime. And who are those hardliners, if you like, who are those within the regime that are amenable to be part of a negotiation to lead to a different type of Iran?
Sure. Mr. Jilani, I just want to bring your thoughts in that we have a situation where if we take what is happening on face value, Pakistan is supposed to play the role of a mediator. US, Donald Trump is keen on implementing a regime change where Khamenei gives way to a leader who's slightly more palatable to Washington, D.C. How does all of that work as far as Indian interests in the region are concerned, with Pakistan acting as a mediator?
No, whether Pakistan is acting as a mediator, there is no evidence that it's acting as a mediator. These are speculative media stories, and I would wait for things to clarify. But the issue is this, that Trump has boasted of quote-unquote total victory, not once, but at least 3 times in recent days. But it's becoming apparent that the illusion of victory is giving way to unpalatable war realities. And the law of unintended consequences is playing out vividly. If the idea was to encourage a popular uprising in Iran, then Trump and company have done the opposite of what they should have done. By killing Iran's supreme leader, they have actually helped the regime in Tehran to turn grief into mass mobilization. The killing of Ayatollah Khamenei in Shia political culture has been framed as martyrdom through religious symbolism rooted in the memory of Karbala and the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. The regime has helped to draw support from the masses. So this is exactly the opposite of what Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister should have done. They should have, instead of unifying the Iranian society, they should have actually done something that would have actually increased the fissures in Iranian society. But there is a bigger issue now.
If I can then ask a supplementary question to you, that if you believe that the death and the killing of Khamenei has caused that sentiment within the Iranian society, the question that I then want to ask is that as we speak of de-escalation, does it become that much harder for the Iranian regime, for the IRGC, for Khamenei to come on the same table as Donald Trump?
Now the US and Israel must deal with a regime in Tehran that is far more hardline than the regime whose leadership they decimated. Now, any deal that emerges from dialogue and diplomacy will be worse for Washington than the deal that Iran was offering when the war began. So today, the choices for Washington and Tel Aviv are not choices that look attractive. And we can see certain frustration building up in Washington, in the White House. Incremental escalation is happening. And if the Vietnam War taught anything, it is that incremental escalation quietly turns a conflict into an open-ended war. And there's danger now that this war could drag on.
Sure. Let me take that across to Mr. Maleki. Mr. Maleki, again, a large part of the conversation over the last few days, at least the last few days, by that I mean the last 10 to 15 days, has been about the disruption in energy. Hormuz, of course, being central to that. if we are to take what is happening on face value, that yes, there are talks underway, yes, there's a mediator mediating between the two sides, do you see a resolution where Iran willfully concedes the control of Strait of Hormuz, given the situation they find themselves in with their leaders being decapitated? Is that a position that is even conceivable for the Iranian leadership moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it is a position that they will have to eventually come to. But I think, just to build on what the other guests have said, the Iranian regime that has emerged so far from this conflict is more hardline, and has been able to raise the stakes and the bets as the US does it. So, over the past few weeks, what we have seen is Iran, showing its capacity to still target the region, to be able to disrupt, even if not physically, the flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what happens is, what kind of gains the Iranians can get politically in ceasefire talks? Can they have recently been much more vocal in trying to say that they should have some sort of control over the Strait of Hormuz. So can they implement that in a ceasefire? Can they get the Americans to, concede that? I see it as very hard to see, because so many of the regional players are not going to accept that. But say eventually a ceasefire is reached and flows start to resume from through Hormuz. In terms of global supply, we'll have some 6 to 8 weeks to get to back to 70% production in the region, the levels that we have had before. And it could take even longer for for oil production, and especially gas production, to be restored to previous levels. We saw the attacks on Ras Laffan in Qatar. It will take years to bring back that capacity.
Right, Mr. Maleki. So no easy answers there. And as far as the options before Donald Trump, well, a rock in a hard place. That's what the consensus appears to be, at least as far as what panelists on board are telling us. I'd like to thank all of our guests, Mr. Maleki, Mr. Chilani, Mr. Dixon, for joining us and sharing your insights. With that, it's a wrap on this special edition on West Asia War. More news and updates will continue on the other side.